Atlanta, Georgia, August 15, 2025. The humid afternoon air clung to the streets of Buckhead, where the polished gleam of luxury cars and manicured lawns defined the affluent neighborhood. Daniel Carter, a 20-year-old biology major at Emory University, navigated his sleek black Sedona graduation gift from his father down Peachtree Avenue, en route to pick up his girlfriend, Sarah, for a quiet study session at a nearby cafe. The young man's hands gripped the steering wheel with the careful precision his father, Marine Corps Commander John Carter, had drilled into him during countless lessons on surviving encounters with law enforcement as a black man in America. Hands visible, no sudden moves. Yes, sir. No, sir. Daniel could almost hear his father's voice echoing in his mind. But nothing could have prepared him for the flashing red and blue lights that appeared in his rearview mirror, signaling the beginning of a tragedy that would ignite a firestorm. Within moments, 3 gunshots would shatter the quiet street, leaving Daniel's lifeless body slumped over the wheel, a victim of Officer Michael Harris's prejudice. As the news reached John Carter at a Marine Corps base 10 miles away, the decorated commander closed his eyes, his heart fracturing under the weight of loss. With a steely resolve forged through decades of service, he picked up his phone and activated Operation Eagle, a meticulously crafted contingency plan to seek justice for his only son. This is the story of a father's unrelenting pursuit to dismantle a corrupt system, not with vengeance, but with the precision of a warrior and the power of the law. Share your thoughts below. What would you do if someone you loved was taken unjustly? Comment 1 if you believe in fighting for justice through legal means. And join us as we unravel this gripping tale of accountability and redemption. Daniel Carter had always been cautious, a habit instilled by his father, John, a 28-year veteran of the Marine Corps whose chest bore medals for valor and whose mind carried the scars of navigating systemic racism in a predominantly white institution. Growing up in a modest but proud home in Decatur, Daniel had absorbed his father's lessons like gospel: keep your hands visible, announce your actions, stay calm, know your rights. At 20, he was the embodiment of Promisa Prem student with a 3.8 GPA, a volunteer tutor for underprivileged teens, and a young man who dreamed of becoming a cardiologist to serve communities like the one he'd grown up in. His car, a sleek Audi A4, was a rare indulgence from John, a symbol of his pride in Daniel's high school valedictorian speech and acceptance to Emory. As Daniel cruised through Buckhead, a neighborhood of sprawling mansions and old money, he was hyper-aware of how his presence might be perceived. The irony wasn't lost on him. A black kid in a nice car often drew more suspicion than admiration. He kept his speed 5 miles below the limit, signaled early, and checked his mirrors obsessively. Yet, despite his vigilance, the wail of a siren cut through the hum of his radio, and his heart sank as he saw the police cruiser tailing him. Officer Michael Harris, 45, had patrolled Atlanta's streets for 18 years, his badge a shield for actions that had long skirted accountability. Known among colleagues for his tough-on-crime stance, Harris carried a reputation for targeting drivers in what he called mismatched neighborhoods code for black or brown faces in wealthy, white areas. His personnel file, buried under layers of bureaucratic protection, held 9 complaints of excessive force and racial profiling, all dismissed or settled quietly through the department's influence and union muscle. To Harris, Daniel's Audi was an anomaly, a red flag in a sea of Bentleys and Teslas. He followed the car for 3 blocks, his eyes narrowing as he scanned for any infraction. When Daniel's turn signal flicked on a half-second later than Harris deemed ideal, he seized the opportunity, flipping on his lights and siren with a practiced flick of his wrist. Daniel, trained for this moment, pulled over smoothly against the curb on a tree-lined stretch of Peachtree, his hands firmly at 10 and 2 on the wheel. He took a deep breath, repeating his father's mantra: stay calm, stay alive. From her front porch, Ellen Thompson, a 67-year-old retired bank teller with a penchant for gardening, noticed the police car's lights and the young man's careful compliance. Something about the officer's posture, hand already on his holster, shoulders squared with aggressions, set her on edge. She pulled out her phone, opened the camera app, and began recording. Her instincts honed by years of watching news stories about police encounters gone wrong. Harris approached Daniel's window with a swagger, his voice sharp as he demanded license and registration. Daniel, maintaining eye contact, responded clearly, "Yes, sir. I'm reaching for my wallet now." His movements were deliberate, slow, as he announced each action. Harris's eyes flickered with surprise, then irritation at the sight of a well-dressed black man in a car that costs more than his annual salary. "Why are you in this neighborhood?" Harris asked, his tone laced with accusation. "I'm picking up my girlfriend, sir," Daniel replied, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "She lives on West Paces Ferry." Harris smirked. Unconvinced, "You sure you're not lost? This isn't your kind of area." The word stung, but Daniel kept his composure, knowing any hint of defiance could escalate things. "No, sir. I'm exactly where I need to be." Harris's face hardened. He wasn't used to being answered with such calm assurance. "Step out of the vehicle," he barked, his hand tightening on his gun. Daniel, still following his father's script, asked, "May I know why, sir? I've complied with all your requests." To Harris, the question was an affront, a challenge to his authority. His pulse quickened, years of unchecked bias and resentment bubbling to the surface. "I said, get out, now," he shouted, drawing his weapon and aiming it through the window. Daniel raised his hands higher, his voice trembling but clear. "'Kay, sir, I'm opening the door." As he reached for the handle, his wallet slipped from his lap, tumbling to the floorboard. Instinctively, he bent to catch it, announcing, "I'm just picking up my ID, sir." But Harris had already made up his mind. The officer's finger squeezed the trigger, and 3 shots tore through the quiet afternoon. Each one a deafening crack that echoed off the mansions lining the street. Ellen Thompson gasped, her phone shaking but still recording as Daniel's body slumped forward, blood staining his crisp white shirt, a birthday gift from his mother, Angela, who had beamed with pride when he wore it to church. Harris stood frozen, gun still raised, his face a mix of shock and defiance. He made no move to check Daniel's pulse or offer aid, instead radioing for backup with a chilling calm. "Shots fired, suspect down, possible weapon." The lie was reflexive, a shield he'd used before. Ellen's video captured every damning detail: Daniel's visible hands, his clear announcement, Harris's aggressive stance, and a callous indifference as the young man bled out. Paramedics arrived 10 minutes later, pronouncing Daniel dead at the scene. Harris, now holstering his weapon, began searching the car. His movements mechanical until he found Daniel's Emory student ID and, more troublingly, a military dependent card bearing the name of Commander John Carter. The officer's jaw tightened. This wasn't just another kid from the city. A military connection meant scrutiny, resources, and consequences he hadn't anticipated. Ellen, her hands still trembling, uploaded the video to social media from her porch. Her caption simple: "This needs to be seen." Within an hour, the footage spread like wildfire, shared by thousands, then millions, across platforms, each view amplifying the outrage. Hashtags like #JusticeForDaniel and #StopPoliceViolence trended nationally. The unedited video, a stark addition to a grim archive of similar tragedies. But this case was different, not because of the act itself, but because of who Daniel's father was, man whose life had been defined by discipline, strategy, and an unyielding commitment to justice. 10 miles away at the Marine Corps Logistics Base in Albany, Georgia, Commander John Carter sat at his desk reviewing deployment schedules. A 6 feet 2 inches figure with close-cropped gray hair and a presence that commanded respect. John had risen through the ranks despite the subtle and overt racism he'd faced in his career. His secure phone buzzed, displaying an unfamiliar Atlanta number. His gut tightened, a warrior's intuition warning him of something catastrophic. "Commander Carter, this is Detective Linda Hayes with the Atlanta Police Department," a woman's voice said, measured but heavy. "There's been an incident involving your son, Daniel." The words that followed, "officer," involved shooting, deceased, investigation pending, landed like shrapnel, each one tearing through the armor of his discipline. John thanked the detective, his voice betraying no emotion, and hung up. For exactly 60 seconds, he allowed himself to break. Memories of teaching Daniel to ride a bike at 5, cheering at his science fair wins at 12, watching him walk across the stage at graduation just 2 years ago. Then his watch beeped, and the Marine in him took over. Grief would wait. Justice could not. John's first call was to Colonel James Rivera, his closest friend and a fellow Marine with a knack for logistics and covert operations. "Jim, it's John. Operation Eagle is active." "Daniel's gone." Rivera's voice shifted instantly to mission mode. "I'm mobilizing now. Command post at your house in 40 mics. Full kit. No condolences, no questions, just action, as they'd trained for in countless operations." John's next call was to Rachel Brooks, a civil rights attorney he'd hired 5 years prior for exactly this scenario. "Ms. Brooks, it's Commander Carter. The contingency we discussed is live." Brooks, who had seen the video already spreading online, responded with quiet resolve. "I'm so sorry, Commander. My team's assembling now. We'll hit every legal angle." John outlined his expectations. No media stunts, just relentless, lawful pressure. As he drove to his Decatur home, his mind compartmentalized the pain, channeling it into tactical precision. By the time John pulled into his driveway, Rivera was already there with a small team. Major Emily Nguyen, a cybersecurity expert. Captain David Brooks, a former Army Ranger with law enforcement contacts. And Sarah Mitchell, a communications specialist skilled in encrypted networks. They moved with purpose, transforming John's dining room into a command center. Laptops hummed, maps of Atlanta spread across the table, and a projector displayed Harris's department photo and personnel file, obtained through Nugent's discreet access to police databases. John addressed the team, his voice steady as granite. "Thank you for being here. My son Daniel was killed today by Officer Michael Harris during a traffic stop. The video evidence is clear. It was unjustified. Our mission is justice legal, systematic, and unassailable. We're not vigilantes. We're professionals dismantling a corrupt system from within." Rivera took point on surveillance, renting properties near Harris's Sandy Springs home through untraceable accounts. Nguyen began digging into Harris's digital footprint, uncovering buried complaints and internal emails. Captain Brooks reached out to sympathetic cops who'd clashed with Harris, securing promises of discreet leaks. Mitchell monitored the video spread, noting its 2 million views and counting, with major news outlets picking it up for evening broadcasts. John assigned roles with the precision of a battlefield commander. No action would be taken without his approval, and every move would be within the law. As night fell, Operation Eagle was fully operational, its tendrils reaching into Harris's life without him suspecting the scale of what was coming. Meanwhile, Harris returned to the precinct, his hands still trembling from adrenaline. The station was a hive of whispers and averted glances. Captain Robert Sullivan, his supervisor, an occasional poker buddy, pulled him into an office. "Mike, we've got a problem. There's a video." "It's bad." Harris bristled, defensive. The kid reached for something, Rob, I followed protocol." Sullivan's face was grim. "The videos online shows his hands, shows him announcing his ID. You didn't even try to help him after." Harris's stomach churned as Sullivan mentioned the union lawyer. Paul Grayson was on his way. When Grayson arrived, he coached Harris to reframe the narrative. "You perceived a lethal threat. You acted to protect public safety." Harris nodded, clinging to the familiar script that had shielded him before. Sent home on paid leave, he drove to his Sandy Springs house, where his wife, Karen, waited, her face pale with worry. "They're saying you shot a college kid, Mike. The videos are everywhere." Harris snapped. "It's being handled." "Karen, he was in the wrong place, acting suspicious." Their daughter, Amy, overheard, her eyes wide with fear. "Dad, what's happening?" Harris softened. "Lying, just work stuff, sweetheart. It'll blow over." But it wouldn't. As Harris poured a whiskey and tried to sleep, unfamiliar cars parked on his street, and a man walking a dog lingered too long near his driveway. His police instincts screamed that something was off, but he couldn't pinpoint it. Across town, John Carter stood in his command center, his team's monitors glowing with data. Harris's phone records, his past complaints, the videos, viral spread. John stepped outside for a moment, staring at the stars Daniel would never see again. "I taught you everything, son," he whispered. And it wasn't enough. Then he returned inside, his resolve hardened. Harris had no idea he'd just killed the son of a man who could wield a network of elite operators like a weapon, all aimed at bringing him to justice. Comment below. Do you think Harris's actions reflect a broken system or a single bad actor? Like this video if you believe accountability starts with exposing the truth. Subscribe to follow this story as a father's strategic fight for justice unfolds in the quiet of his Decatur home. Commander John Carter stood at the head of his dining room table, now a nerve center for Operation Eagle, his eyes scanning the faces of his team under the harsh glow of LED monitors. Atlanta's skyline glimmered faintly through the window, a reminder of the city where his son, Daniel, had been gunned down just hours ago on August 15, 2025. The viral video of Officer Michael Harris shooting the unarmed 20-year-old Emory student had already amassed 3 million views, fueling protests outside City Hall and trending hashtags like #JusticeForDaniel. But John wasn't interested in the noise of public outrage. He wanted precision, not chaos. His contingency plan, years in the making, was now a living machine, its gears turning with military discipline to dismantle the system that had shielded Harris for nearly 2 decades. Colonel James Rivera, a grizzled Marine with a knack for covert logistics, coordinated surveillance teams around Harris's Sandy Springs home. Major Emily Nguyen, a cybersecurity prodigy, mined data from police servers uncovering a trail of buried complaints. Captain David Brooks, a former Army Ranger with deep law enforcement contacts, worked to extract insider information. Sarah Mitchell, a communications specialist, tracked the digital pulse of public reaction. Rachel Brooks, the civil rights attorney, prepared legal salvos to strike at Harris, the Atlanta PD, and the city itself. As Harris sat in his suburban house, oblivious to the noose tightening around him, John's team operated like a shadow army, their mission clear: expose Harris's history, pressure his protectors, and ensure justice through unassailable legal means. Share your thoughts below. Can a strategic, lawful approach outmaneuver a corrupt system? Comment too if you believe in fighting injustice with precision over protest. And stay with us as Operation Eagle unfolds to hold a killer accountable. The transformation of John Carter's home into a tactical command center was swift and seamless, a testament to the team's training and loyalty to a commander who had saved lives in deserts and jungles. By midnight, the dining room buzzed with activity. Encrypted laptops hummed, satellite maps of Sandy Springs pinned to the walls, and a secure phone line linked to Rachel Brooks's law office downtown. Rivera, a stocky man with a scar tracing his jawline from a Fallujah ambush, briefed John on the surveillance operation. "We've secured 2 rental properties on Harris's Street through shell accounts," he said, pointing to a map. Team Alpha's got eyes on his house front, back, and side approaches. Team Bravo's setting up audio and visual feeds. "We're ghosts, sir. He won't see us." John nodded, his face a mask of focus. "No direct engagement, Jim. We stay invisible and legal." Nguyen, her fingers dancing across a keyboard, chimed in. "I've got partial access to Harris's personnel file. 9 complaints since 2007-06 involving Black or Hispanic civilians. All buried, cross-referencing with deleted emails from his precinct server." "There's a pattern of cover-ups, Commander." John's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Dig deeper, Emily. Find who signed off on those dismissals. We need names." Across town, Michael Harris sat on his living room couch, a half-empty whiskey bottle on the coffee table. The TV muted on a news channel, replaying the video of him shooting Daniel Carter. His wife, Karen, had retreated upstairs with their daughter, Amy, after a tense argument about the video's damning clarity. Harris's phone buzzed with texts from colleagues, but the messages were vague. "Hang in there. Man or unions got you lacking." The usual camaraderie. He scrolled through social media, his stomach churning as comments called him a murderer, a racist, a disgrace. The video, shot by Ellen Thompson from her Buckhead porch, showed everything. Daniel's hands visible. His calm announcement about reaching for his ID, the 3 shots Harris fired without hesitation. He told himself it was a split-second decision. That Daniel's movement could have been a threat, but the footage mocked his justification. At the precinct earlier, Captain Robert Sullivan had promised the department would handle it, but his eyes avoided Harris's, a telltale sign of doubt. Paul Grayson, the union lawyer, had coached him to stick to the lethal threat narrative. But even Grayson seemed less confident than in past incidents. Harris poured another drink, trying to drown the unease creeping up his spine. Outside, a car slowed past his house, its headlights lingering too long. He dismissed it as paranoia, unaware that Rivera's Team Alpha was already in position, their night vision cameras capturing his silhouette through the blinds. John Carter's team operated with surgical efficiency, each member leveraging their expertise to build an airtight case. Captain David Brooks, a towering figure with a shaved head and a network of law enforcement contacts, worked his phone, calling officers who'd had run-ins with Harris. "I've got a sergeant from the 3rd Precinct," Brooks reported, his voice low. "Says Harris roughed up a black teen in 2019, broke his collarbone." The complaint was squashed by Sullivan himself. "The sergeant's willing to talk off-record if we guarantee anonymity." John approved, emphasizing discretion. "No leaks until we're ready. We don't tip our hand." Sarah Mitchell, monitoring social media from a corner desk, updated the team on the video's impact. 4 million views now, Commander. CNN and MSNBC are running segments tonight. Protests are forming outside the precinct and City Hall. Public sentiments heavily against Harris, but the police unions pushing back, claiming the videos out of context. John's eyes narrowed. Let them spin. The truth doesn't need a narrative. Rachel Brooks, conferenced in via secure video, outlined her legal strategy. "We filed motions to preserve all evidence dashcam, body cam if Harris was wearing one, and the precinct's internal logs. I'm drafting a wrongful death suit against Harris, the department, the city, and the union. Damages in the tens of millions. We're also pushing for an independent DOJ investigation." John's response was firm. "Make it bulletproof, Rachel. They'll fight dirty." In Sandy Springs, Harris's sense of isolation grew. His phone rang at 2 a.m., an unknown number. He answered, expecting a reporter, but heard only silence before a click. 10 minutes later, it happened again. By the third call, his nerves were frayed. He checked the windows, noticing a new SUV parked across the street, its driver obscured. Harris told himself it was a neighbor, but his cop instincts screamed surveillance. He didn't know that Rivera's team had rented the house opposite his, installing motion sensors and encrypted cameras that recorded his every move. Karen, unable to sleep, confronted him in the kitchen. "Mike, the news is saying Daniel Carter was a Strata student, a military kid. His dad's some high-ranking Marine. This isn't going away." Harris snapped. "It always does, Karen. The department's got my back." But his voice lacked conviction. Amy, overhearing from the hallway, clutched her phone, where classmates had sent her links to the video with messages like, "Is this your dad?" Her world was crumbling, and Harris, lost in his denial, couldn't see it. Back at the command center, Nguyen uncovered a bombshell. "Got something, sir?" she said, pulling up a file on her screen. An internal memo from 2018, Sullivan and 2 other captains signed off on dismissing a complaint against Harris for planting weeds on a black business owner. The owner settled out of court, but the memo mentions keeping Harris on a short leash. They knew he was a problem. John's fists clenched, but his voice remained calm. "Send it to Rachel." That's leverage. Rivera reported that Team Alpha had intercepted a call Harris made to Grayson, the union lawyer, begging for more support. "He's rattled," Rivera said. "Keeps pacing by the windows. We've got audio of him arguing with his wife. She's pushing him to come clean." John shook his head. "He won't. Men like Harris double down. Keep the pressure on, but no mistakes. We're not giving them an excuse to paint us as the aggressors." As dawn broke, the operation expanded. Rivera deployed a second surveillance team to monitor the Atlanta PD's 3rd precinct, where Harris worked. Nguyen hacked into the department's scheduling system, identifying officers who'd partnered with Harris on past shifts, potential witnesses to his behavior. Brooks secured a meeting with a retired detective who'd filed a whistleblower report on Harris in 2016, only to be forced out of the department. The detective promised a sworn statement detailing Harris's history of targeting minorities. Mitchell tracked a surge in online petitions calling for Harris's arrest, alongside counter-narratives from police unions claiming Daniel was non-compliant. Rachel Brooks, working from her office, filed an emergency injunction to freeze Harris's personnel records, preventing any destruction of evidence. She also reached out to the mayor's office, leveraging the public outcry to demand a meeting with the police commissioner. Harris, meanwhile, felt the walls closing in. At 8 a.m., he turned on the TV to see a local news anchor discussing Daniel Carter's academic achievements and his father's distinguished military career. The contrast was stark, a promising young man versus a cop with a tainted record. Harris's phone buzzed with a text from Sullivan. "Stay off social media. Union's meeting with the chief today." The message offered no reassurance, only a reminder of his precarious position. When Harris stepped outside to check his mailbox, he noticed a jogger slowing near his driveway, seemingly staring. He shouted, "What are you looking at?" But the jogger part of Rivera's team continued without responding. Harris's paranoia spiked. He called Grayson again, demanding why's the union dragging its feet. "I need protection." Grayson's tone was curt. "The video's a problem, Mike. We're doing what we can, but the chief's under pressure. Lay low." Aris slammed the phone down, unaware that Nguyen had tapped his line, recording every word. John Carter's team didn't rest. Rivera's surveillance units reported Harris's growing agitation, noting his frequent calls to colleagues who no longer answered. Nguyen uncovered a 2014 incident where Harris had choked a black teenager during a stop and frisk. with Sullivan falsifying the report to claim the teen resisted arrest. Brooks's contacts revealed that Sullivan was now distancing himself, telling Internal Affairs he'd tried to rein Harris in. Rachel Brooks met with the district attorney, presenting the video alongside NewGen's findings. This isn't just one bad stop, she argued. Harris has a documented history of racial bias, and the department enabled him. You've got enough for manslaughter, maybe murder. The DA, wary of prosecuting a cop, admitted the evidence was compelling but urged caution. Rachel pressed harder. The public's watching. You don't act, the DOJ will. By noon, Harris's neighborhood felt like a pressure cooker. Protesters gathered at the end of his street, holding signs reading "Justice for Daniel" and "No more killer cops." News vans parked nearby, their cameras trained on his house. Harris peeked through his blinds, his heart pounding as he saw a crowd of 50, their chants audible even through closed windows. Karen, packing a bag for herself and Amy, pleaded, "Mike, we need to leave. This is getting out of control." Harris refused. "I'm not running. They'll spin it like I'm guilty." Amy, tears streaming down her face, begged, "Dad, they're saying you killed him for no reason. Just tell the truth." Harris's temper flared. "You don't get it, Amy. It's not that simple." His shout silenced her, and she fled to her room, locking the door. Harris poured another drink, his hands shaking as he realized his family was slipping away. John Carter, standing in his command center, reviewed the latest updates. Mitchell reported that the video had hit 5 million views, with major outlets now interviewing Daniel's classmates, who described him as kind, driven, and fearless. Rivera's team sent photos of Harris pacing his driveway, arguing with Karen. Nguyen flagged an email from Sullivan to the police chief, dated a year ago, warning that Harris's aggressive tactics could blow up in our faces. John saw the opening. "Get that to Rachel," he ordered. It proves they knew and did nothing. Rachel, in turn, used the email to pressure the mayor's office, securing a promise for a public statement on the case by day's end. John stepped outside for a moment, the weight of his son's absence hitting him like a wave. He remembered Daniel's laugh, his stubborn insistence on double-checking his lab reports. "You were perfect, son," he whispered. Then he returned inside, his mission sharper than ever. Harris, now alone in his house as Karen took Amy to her sister's, felt the isolation deepen. His phone rang, again another unknown number, another silent hang-up. He checked his security cameras, noticing a delivery van parked too long at the corner. Rivera's team, disguised as utility workers, had planted a listening device near his mailbox, capturing his frantic calls to Grayson. At the precinct, Sullivan met with Internal Affairs, offering carefully curated documents to paint himself as a reformer who tried to curb Harris's behavior. The betrayal stung Harris when he heard through a colleague's text, "Sullivan's throwing you under the bus." Desperate, Harris logged on to an extremist forum, venting about being railroaded by woke politics. Users responded with promises of support, some hinting at taking a stand. Nguyen flagged the posts, alerting John. "He's reaching out to dangerous people, sir. We need to contain this." John nodded. "Inform the DA and local PD. We don't engage directly, but we don't let this escalate." As night fell, Operation Eagle's pressure tactics intensified without crossing legal lines. Rivera's team drove unmarked cars past Harris's house at irregular intervals, their headlights sweeping his windows. Mitchell seeded social media with targeted posts amplifying Daniel's story while exposing Harris's history of complaints. Rachel Brooks filed a second motion, demanding Harris's immediate suspension without pay. The mayor, facing a growing protest now numbering in the hundreds, issued a statement promising a thorough investigation but avoiding Harris's name. Harris, watching the news, felt the system he'd relied on crumbling. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We know what you did." He threw it across the room, his bravado replaced by dread. He didn't know that John Carter's team was orchestrating every move. Their operation a masterclass in psychological and legal warfare. Comment below. Do you think Harris's isolation is justice, or does it risk pushing him to desperation? Like this video if you believe a father's strategic fight can change a broken system. Subscribe to see how Operation Eagle corners a killer without firing a shot, as the sun rose over Atlanta on August 20th, 2025. The city pulsed with tension. Its streets alive with protests and news vans circling the epicenter of a tragedy that had captured the nation's attention. 5 days after Officer Michael Harris gunned down Daniel Carter, a 20-year-old Emory student, on a quiet Buckhead street, Commander John Carter's Operation Eagle had transformed from a covert legal strategy into a force that was dismantling the protective shield around Harris. From his Decatur command center, John orchestrated a relentless campaign. Colonel James Rivera's surveillance teams shadowed Harris's every move. Major Emily Nguyen's cyber operations exposed his buried history of misconduct, and Rachel Brooks's legal maneuvers tightened the noose with motions and lawsuits. The viral video of Daniel's death, now viewed over 10 million times, had shifted public sentiment decisively against Harris, with hashtags like #JusticeForDaniel dominating social media. But as Harris barricaded himself in his Sandy Springs home, his desperation spiraled, drawing dangerous allies from extremist corners of the internet. What began as a disciplined pursuit of justice now teetered on the edge of a volatile standoff, testing John's resolve to prioritize systemic change over personal vengeance. With Harris cornered, his former protectors abandoning him, and armed supporters converging on his street, John faced a critical moment. Could he prevent bloodshed while ensuring accountability? Share your thoughts below. Can a father's grief fuel justice without descending into chaos? Comment 3. If you believe in holding the system accountable through strategy, not violence. And join us as Operation Eagle reaches its climax. The morning air in Sandy Springs carried an eerie calm, broken only by the distant hum of news helicopters circling above Harris's middle-class neighborhood. Inside his house, Harris sat hunched at his kitchen table, a loaded Glock 17 beside a half-empty bottle of bourbon. Sleep had eluded him. His nights haunted by silent phone calls, unfamiliar cars patrolling his street, and the relentless replay of Daniel Carter's shooting on every channel. The once confident officer who had navigated 9 excessive force complaints with the department's protection now felt like prey. His wife, Karen, had taken their 16-year-old daughter, Amy, to her sister's house in Marietta, unable to bear the protesters' chants or the neighbors' cold stares. Harris's phone, once buzzing with supportive texts from colleagues, was now silent except for alerts about the grand jury convening to consider murder charges against him. The police union, led by lawyer Paul Grayson, had shifted from staunch defense to lukewarm promises of limited representation, citing the optics of the video. Captain Robert Sullivan, Harris's mentor for 15 years, had betrayed him, feeding internal affairs a curated paper trail to paint himself as a reformer who'd tried to curb Harris's aggression. The system that had always shielded Harris was collapsing, and he didn't know that John Carter's elite team was the architect of its downfall at the Decatur Command Center. John Carter stood before his team, his Marine Corps discipline masking the grief that gnawed at his core. The dining room, now a war room, hummed with activity. Monitors displayed live feeds from Rivera's surveillance units, Nugent's hacked data streams, and Mitchell's social media analytics. Rivera updated the team on Harris's deteriorating state. "He's unraveling, sir." Our audio picks up him, arguing with himself, pacing all night. "He's drinking heavily, and we've spotted 2 armed men in civilian clothes loitering near his driveway. They're not ours." Nguyen interjected, her screen showing a flurry of encrypted messages from an extremist forum Harris had joined. He's been posting about a deep state conspiracy against him, rallying supporters. 3 users are organizing an armed protection detail for him, claiming they'll arrive by noon. John's eyes narrowed. This can't escalate into a firefight. Alert the Atlanta PD and FBI. We stay hands-off, but we feed them everything. Rachel Brooks, joining via secure video, reported her progress. The DA's convening the grand jury today. I've submitted Nguyen's evidence, Sullivan's memos, the buried complaints and witness statements from 2 former colleagues. We're pushing for first-degree murder, not manslaughter. The video's airtight and public pressures forcing their hand. Outside Harris's house, the situation grew volatile. By 10 a.m., a crowd of 200 protesters had gathered at the neighborhood's entrance. Their signs demanding arrest, Harris now, and no justice, no peace. News crews filmed from a safe distance, their live feeds capturing the growing police presence, squad cars blocking streets, SWAT teams staging behind armored vehicles. Harris peeked through his blinds, his pulse racing as he saw the chaos unfolding. His phone rang with an unknown number, and he answered, expecting another silent threat. Instead, a gruff voice said, "Officer Harris, this is Patriot Shield. We're here, posted across the street. You're not alone." Harris's stomach twisted. The forum users he'd vented to were real, armed, and on his doorstep. He hadn't meant for it to go this far, but his desperation had fueled their zeal. "Just keep it calm," he muttered, unsure if he was reassuring them or himself. He didn't know that Nguyen's team had intercepted the call, relaying it to the FBI, or now coordinating with local police to contain the armed civilians. John Carter, monitoring the situation from Decatur, recognized the risk of escalation. He called Captain David Brooks, who'd secured a direct line to the Atlanta PD's incident commander. "Tell them we've got evidence of 3 armed civilians." At Harris's address, John instructed, "They're not protesters, they're extremists responding to his posts. We need a de-escalation plan, not a raid." Brooks nodded, relaying the intel. Meanwhile, Rivera's surveillance team reported a new development. One of the armed men, wearing a tactical vest, had approached Harris's porch, shouting encouragement. "We've got your back, Mike. Don't let them take you." Harris, peering out, felt a mix of relief and dread. These strangers were his only allies, but their presence was turning his home into a battleground. He clutched his Glock, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. A shootout, a siege, his daughter watching it all on TV at noon. The Atlanta PD escalated their response, establishing a command post 2 blocks from Harris's house. Crisis negotiators, led by Captain Geraldine Walsh, prepared to make contact, but John Carter saw an opportunity to intervene. His years in hostage rescue operations had taught him that a familiar voice could defuse a volatile situation. He requested permission from Walsh to speak to Harris directly, leveraging his military credentials and the moral weight of being Daniel's father. Walsh, wary but impressed by John's calm authority, agreed. "You've got 10 minutes to get him talking," she said. "After that, we go in." John dialed Harris's number, obtained through Nguyen's intercepts. When Harris answered, his voice was slurred with alcohol and fear. "Who the hell is this?" John's tone was steady, commanding. "Officer Harris, this is Commander John Carter, Daniel's father. I'm calling to give you a chance to end this without more blood." Harris laughed bitterly. "You're the one doing this to me. You and your damn video." John didn't flinch. "I'm the one trying to keep you alive, Harris. Your supporters outside are turning this into a war zone. You want your daughter to see you die on live TV?" The mention of Amy pierced Harris's haze. He sank onto his couch, the Glock trembling in his hand. "What do you want from me? You've already ruined my life." John's voice softened, but not with sympathy. "I want justice, not your death. You killed my son, but I'm not here to kill you. Walk out unarmed, hands up, and face the legal system. It's your only way out." Harris hesitated, his mind a tangle of fear, guilt, and defiance. Outside, the situation deteriorated. One of his supporters fired a warning shot into the air, prompting a police sniper to take position. The crowd of protesters hearing the shot surged forward, only to be pushed back by riot police. Walsh radioed John. "Time's up, Commander. He's got armed backup, and we're not waiting for a massacre." John, sensing Harris's wavering, played his final card. "I have your wife and daughter on another line. They want to talk to you." Harris froze. "You're lying." John signaled Mitchell, who patched in Karen and Amy from a secure line at their relative's house. Karen's voice came through, shaking but firm. "Mike, please, stop this. You're scaring Amy. Just surrender." Amy's small voice followed, breaking with sobs. "Dad, don't die. Please, I need you." The words shattered Harris's resolve. For the first time, he saw the wreckage of his actions, not just Daniel's death, but the pain radiating to his own family. He set the Glock down, his hands shaking. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll come out." I'll relayed the decision. To Walsh, emphasizing no excessive force. "He's complying. Treat him like any suspect, nothing more." Following John's instructions, Harris unloaded his weapons, placing them in a bathroom sink. He called the two supporters outside, ordering them to stand down, but only one complied, the other shouting, "Don't give in." Harris ignored him, pulling on a plain t-shirt to show he was unarmed. At 1:15 p.m., he opened his front door, stepped onto the porch, and raised his hands high, his face pale and haggard under the glare of police floodlights. From the command post, John watched through binoculars as SWAT officers cuffed Harris and led him to a transport van. Rivera stood beside him, his voice low. "You just saved the man who killed your son, sir." John lowered the binoculars, his expression unreadable. "This isn't about saving him, Jim. It's about changing the system that let him think he could get away with it." As the van pulled away, the protesters erupted in cheers, unaware of the invisible force that had orchestrated the outcome. Newgen reported that the grand jury had returned an indictment for first-degree murder. Based on Rachel's evidence and the public outcry, Rachel, still at her office, prepared for the next phase, a civil lawsuit against the city, the department, and the union, seeking $30 million to fund systemic reform. Mitchell noted that social media was now flooded with tributes to Daniel, his Emory classmates sharing stories of his kindness and ambition. The aftermath unfolded swiftly. Harris, detained at Fulton County Jail, faced a barrage of media coverage as his trial date was set. Sullivan, desperate to salvage his career, testified against Harris, revealing a decade of covered-up incidents. The police union, under scrutiny, withdrew all support, leaving Harris with a court-appointed attorney. Rachel's lawsuit gained traction, with the mayor announcing a civilian oversight board to review police conduct, a direct result of John's pressure on the commissioner. John, however, found no solace in these victories. He visited Daniel's grave that evening, placing a single white rose beside the headstone engraved with Daniel Carter. 2005 to 2025, future healer. "We're not done, son," he whispered, his voice breaking for the first time since the operation began. 6 months later, on February 21, 2026, the courtroom was packed as the jury delivered its verdict. Harris, gaunt and graying, stood motionless. As the foreman declared, "We find the defendant, Michael Harris, guilty of murder in the first degree." Gasps rippled through the gallery, but John sat still, his hands clasped tightly. Rachel, beside him, squeezed his arm, her eyes reflecting both triumph and sorrow. At the sentencing, Judge Anita Patel addressed Harris with measured gravity. "You swore an oath to protect, yet you let bias guide your actions, ending a life full of promise. This court sentences you to life without parole." Harris's head bowed, said nothing as he was led away. John took the podium for his victim impact statement, his dress uniform gleaming under the courtroom lights. "My son Daniel was studying to save lives," he said, his voice steady but heavy. "He followed every rule I taught him, and it wasn't enough. This isn't just about one officer, it's about a system that fails to hold its own accountable. Daniel's death must mean something." The civil lawsuit settled for $28 million, funding the Daniel Carter Foundation for Police Reform, which John led after retiring from the Marines. The foundation trained officers in de-escalation, advocated for independent oversight, and offered scholarships to youth affected by police misconducting, surprisingly, Amy Harris. In a quiet meeting at the foundation's Atlanta office, John met with Karen and Amy, offering the scholarship with no trace of resentment. "Your daughter's future shouldn't suffer for her father's actions," he told Karen, who wept at the unexpected compassion. Amy, clutching her mother's hand, whispered, "I'm sorry for what he did." John only nodded, his pain still. Raw, but his purpose clear. The foundation's impact grew, with Daniel's story becoming a cornerstone of national police training programs. John's team transitioned to permanent roles. Rivera ran operations, Nguyen led data analysis, and Brooks developed accountability protocols. Sullivan and 2 other captains faced obstruction charges, and the Atlanta PD underwent federal oversight, implementing body cameras and bias training. On the first anniversary of Daniel's death, John learned that Daniel had tutored teens in a community program, including friends of Amy Harris, a connection neither had known. The revelation deepened John's commitment, leading to the creation of the Daniel Mentorship Program, which fostered trust between youth and police in marginalized communities. Standing at Daniel's grave, John placed his son's Emory acceptance letter beside the rose. "You're still changing the world, son," he said softly. The wound of loss unhealed but transformed into a legacy of change. Comment below, does justice mean punishment? Or can it include compassion for the guilty's family? Like this video. If you believe one man's strategy can reshape a broken system, subscribe to follow stories of resilience and reform, and share this video to spark conversations about accountability.